In a world drowning in data, open source intelligence is the difference between noise and insight. I'm Jake Creps, and this is the OSINT Podcast, unpacking the tools, tactics, and techniques that matter to the OSINT community. Whether you're tracking threats, analyzing platforms, or just trying to separate signal from noise, this is your go-to resource for all things open source intelligence. Let's get started. Hey everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the OSINT Podcast. If you joined us for the relaunch of the podcast in episode 1, thank you for returning. For those who are new listeners, thanks for discovering us. And if you are not familiar, this podcast follows the OSINT newsletter, and specifically the OSINT newsletter issue 78. If you aren't familiar, go ahead and check it out. It's osintnewsletter.com. And if you're looking for this specific issue, it's going to be osintnewsletter.com/78. We have a free version of the newsletter for everybody. And then if you're really interested in developing your skills in open source intelligence, we also have a paid version of that newsletter that gives you tools, tactics, and techniques that you're not going to find online, a specific methodology that I find in my research that I want to share with you as readers and as listeners. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about several different things. I'm going to run through the free portion of the newsletter, covering topics like Instagram launching a new Snap Map clone, validating Gmail addresses ethically without using third-party tools or violating terms of service, looking at some new phishing techniques that are being seen in the wild, and just some things to look out for if you're investigating fraud and scams. Then we're going to be moving over into the tools section, where we're going to be looking at a search engine for searching for files dumped on Mega.nz. If you're not familiar with that tool, it's similar to Dropbox, for example, a few other file storage services. Then we're going to be moving on to an AI agent search engine, and these are specific agents that are set up to do certain tasks for you that you typically have to do searches for. This is sort of like an all-included box of tool sets that will be able to find specific information for you and summarize it in a very productive way. And then finally, I'm going to be talking about, once again, another creative idea in open source intelligence, looking at reverse tattoo searching. Specifically, the idea of the complexity of having something like a face recognition search engine, something similar to that, but specifically for tattoos. We'll talk about that for a little bit. Again, if you missed us in the last issue of the OSINT newsletter, go ahead and check out osintnewsletter.com/77. That issue's topic was using VS Code and Copilot for OSINT investigations. We also covered all of the information in episode 1 of the OSINT podcast, so check out the last episode, and let's go ahead and get started. So the first topic is Instagram launching a Snap Map-like tool. So if you're not familiar with Snap Map, it's sort of a way to see all public Snapchat stories that were posted that are geotagged. And so if there's something like a major event happening, like a protest or a concert or any type of outdoor activity that people will typically geotag themselves in to say, hey, look, I'm here, I'm participating in this event, you would be able to find those videos online, publicly available, and be able to collect information about that event passively. So if there was like riots, for example, like what we saw in the US with the George Floyd riots, a lot of that stuff will show up on SnapMap, and you'd be able to monitor that stuff passively and get live video. Instagram, through Meta, has launched a similar feature, and this is really targeted towards the Gen Z demographic. They're a very location sharing generation. They like to share their location, whether it's through SMS like Apple Messages or iMessage, or it's something on Snapchat, pretty common tool, or SMS app for Gen Z. Now they're looking to be more relevant within the Instagram space and do geotagging. Now, if you've been in the OSINT space for a while, you know that geotagging used to be something that was very reliable for you to be able to find information about a specific place. Then there was a period of time, because of a variety of data privacy issues, that geotag content was going away. Now it seems to be coming back, and it's mostly driven by user demand, different demographic changes, and different sort of stances on data privacy. So if you remember the days where Twitter was geotagged, Facebook was geotagged, YouTube, etc., it seems like some of that's coming back. And now it's not as easy to search as it used to be. You used to be able to just throw coordinates into a search engine and find all of the content that was posted in that area. Now there's a specific map that has all this information, similar to Snap Map, that you're able to pull live video from or images from. It is going to be a little bit more difficult to mine that information at scale. And I do mention a few things in the newsletter about how this is a very large privacy concern. There will be startups, different companies out there that scrape all of this data, store it, and have it retrievable for law enforcement, for government agencies, corporations, etc. But there'll also be government agencies doing this as well, pulling all this data down and storing it, because oftentimes, at least with SnapMap, a lot of this stuff was ephemeral. So it would be posted for a certain period of time and then it would go away. But if you're able to extract that information and store it long term, you're going to be able to have a long history of information that you can go back and look into, especially for events that have occurred in the past. For example, like an active shooter situation or something like that. You'll be able to go back and find content even weeks after the event has concluded. So definitely go ahead and check that out. Head to the newsletter, osintnewsletter.com/78. Go to the OSINT news section. There is a piece on there from Amy.nz, and she talks a little bit about this on LinkedIn, but I've also mentioned the link directly on Meta to be able to read sort of the public service announcement or the PR response from Meta on the issue. Okay, so the next thing on the list is how to validate a Gmail address ethically. So what do I mean by validating a Gmail address? Let's say that you have tons of Gmail addresses that you get in some sort of dump, or maybe there's a Gmail address that was provided to you and you want to see if it's an actually legitimate email or not. Now, other than trying to send a message to this email address and see what happens, which is definitely something you shouldn't do, there are a couple different ways to validate if a Gmail exists or not. Ritu Gill mentions this on her post in Forensic OSINT about one method that you can use to validate this. And so the details are in OSINT newsletters. I'm not going to read out the whole URL and the method here on the podcast. But essentially what you can do is you can add the email address to the Google Calendar link. And if, depending on the response that you see when you visit that URL, it will tell you if the Gmail is active or not. Another thing that you can do, which isn't mentioned in this post, but I do have a little note on this in the newsletter, is that if you go into Google Sheets and you paste that Gmail address in there and you hover over the Gmail, sometimes if it's an active account, you'll not only be able to see the Gmail address, but you'll also be able to see information about the user who owns it. So this is sort of a nice built-in reverse email lookup that's built into some of the Google tools, specifically within their ecosystem. So if you're new to OSINT and you're not familiar with these types of methods, and a lot of the feedback that I've been hearing from some of the subscribers of the newsletter is that, hey, I'm a little bit more on the basic side. I need something that isn't so advanced, and I know that I tend to go more into the advanced OSINT topics. This one is definitely for you. Check it out in the OSINT news section. It's the second one on the list. All right. The next one on the list is phishing with Japanese characters. That's what I put as the title. It's kind of a tongue-in-cheek there. But one of these posts that I was seeing on LinkedIn is a new method that I haven't seen before, which there is a Japanese character that sort of can look like a / at first glance, especially if the text is really small. But it's actually a way that people are using for phishing people. So essentially what happens is you have a site that isn't the website that you're looking for. Like in the example, I use facebook.com, right? And let's say that you're trying to phish somebody to think that they're actually going to Facebook, but your domain is something like Facebook-site.com. It's not the real thing, but you want it to look like the real thing, right? So you put facebook.com and you put this Japanese character in there that looks sort of like a /. You put help somewhere in between and another one of these /, and that's actually the subdomain of your bad URL, your phishing URL. So when you're just looking at the truncated version of that URL, it looks like the real deal, especially somebody to the untrained eye. So they think they're clicking on Facebook. They go to a website that's an exact mirror of a Facebook login page, for example. They put in their email or their username and the password. Now that information's been shipped off to the scammer and they're able to log into your account, or they're able to harvest that information. And considering a lot of people use the same password on several different accounts, they can quickly reverse look up your email address the same way that OSINT investigators do, and they can apply that password to as many different places as they can to try to get into something that they call account takeover, and finding accounts that they can grab and either ransom them back to you and try to get you to pay to get it back, or they can sell it off to a variety of different people who want to use that for more advanced scams, like harvesting bank account information that might be on there, harvesting information from your friends list. For example, you get into somebody's Facebook account and then you start messaging some of their friends and trying to scam people that way as well. There's a bunch of sophisticated things that people are doing, but this is a new method that I recommend you go check out. These are types of things that, they're constantly getting creative and finding new ways to scam people. So if you head on over to the OSINT news section in the newsletter, it's the third one on the list. There's also a quick write-up about it that I linked to LinkedIn that shows a little bit more examples and some commentary around the topic. All right, moving on to the OSINT tools section. There's three really cool things that I want to highlight here. The first one, I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation of it, but it's Meawfy, Meawfy. It's a search engine that searches specifically within a giant repository of Mega.nz files, and you can search by keyword. And it's similar to Dropbox, right? But one of the reasons why I'm familiar with it is that this was an area where a lot of people dump combo lists. And if you don't know what a combo list is, if somebody gets a giant data dump somewhere, it has a combo of both the email address and the password that's associated with that email. And so a lot of times hackers or scammers, fraudsters, et cetera, they want to buy and sell this data and then attempt to do the same thing with account takeover, or maybe they enrich it with other data sets that may have things like first and last names, physical addresses, et cetera. They glue all of these sources together and then they sell that at an even higher value. And so one of the reasons why that's valuable for an OSINT investigator is that you can take that information and use it to enrich some of your investigations. So this is one of these gray areas in open source intelligence, right, where technically it's publicly available information. My general rule of thumb is avoid any of the password information. Don't try to use passwords in any sort of way. The only way that pivoting off of passwords is usually valuable is if there's a very, very unique password and you can use that password to pivot into alternate email addresses and then taking those email addresses and trying to enrich those to match different profiles. This is something that's typically I only recommend for law enforcement and people who are doing criminal investigations because it is so ethically gray. However, it is a method that you can use to sort of tie two different identifiers together to make sense of an investigation. But this isn't the only way that you can use this search engine to find valuable information. Mega.nz is also a treasure trove for a variety of different PDFs, CSVs, a bunch of different files, even images. And you can, instead of having to go and do Google Docs and sort of do like in text Mega.nz and then put a bunch of different keywords and things like that, this tool sort of brings it all together for you. So you can do a single search, you can find the source link, you can sort of learn a little bit about the metadata of the file, and then you can decide whether or not you want to investigate it further rather than just downloading blind and seeing what's inside of it. So I want to do a shout out of Mario Centella. Sorry if I butchered the last name. I saw you shared this on LinkedIn. I appreciate all the different content that you're constantly sharing, and I'm sure you've noticed a lot of that content ends up making it into the newsletter and now the podcast. All right, so moving on, the next thing on the list is Agent.ai. This is something that I recently ran into, and it's actually really cool. So a lot of people have been talking about the different use cases of AI, right? And how it can be useful for OSINT investigations. And a lot of it's sort of been gimmicky, for the lack of better terms. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to do geolocation with ChatGPT, and it's only right like 50% of the time. Or we're going to do like advanced searching with GPT and hope that it's not hallucinating, giving us false information just to please us. But there are really good practical use cases for using AI within OSINT, but I don't think it's very good for replacing the search process. I don't think it's very good for replacing the analysis process, but I do think it's good for improving the way that you do searching and analysis to make it more efficient. And so on the search aspect of things, Agent.ai has a bunch of pre-canned different agents that you can use. And one of the ones that I call out in the newsletter is a company research agent. And what this does is you can put in a domain. And if you're familiar with anything like Crunchbase or any of these like business search engine aggregators, the result it gives you is very similar. But what I really thought was interesting is it takes not only the information about the company, but it also aggregates things like Glassdoor reviews, social media profiles, things like that. And things that usually take 1, 2, 3, 4 different searches, it puts it all together for you in one nice little package. And so it's a really good way just to put in a domain, pull a bunch of information down, and then search for ways to pivot off the information that you find by doing manual searches or feeding that information back into an AI like a ChatGPT to be able to recommend different searches like, hey, build me a Google Dork that will help me refine this information further. I think things like that are going to be helpful use cases for AI for the time being, instead of just saying, hey, analyze this information, write a report for me, and I'm going to take that report directly to my stakeholders and tell them what's going on. Like, that's a terrible idea. Use it to augment your abilities instead. Agent.ai is going to be a good way that you can do that. Okay, so the last thing on the list is this site called Tattoodo, I think is how it's pronounced. It's sort of like a website that you can search for tattoos by keyword. So if you want a tattoo of a sun, for example, it'll show you a bunch of different variations of a tattoos of suns. Now, some people have mentioned this as like an OSINT tool at its core. I don't really think that's the case because it doesn't really have a good way to give you information about that person. So let's say that you find a tattoo that matches an individual that you're investigating, but it doesn't really take you in any other direction other than that, other than here's an image of that tattoo. But some people have had some conversations about this online. Aiden Rainey is one of those, where he's like, hey, why don't we use that information to build out an AI or like a machine learning model that can be able to identify tattoos. So if you send in a photo, like a full torso photo of somebody who has like neck tattoos or forearm tattoos or whatever, it would be able to pivot off those tattoos, since they are sort of unique identifiers, and give you similar results that are across different profiles. So instead of just relying on the face, you're also pivoting off of other unique things like tattoos. Now, in general, in practice, I'm a big fan of methodology and tool making. As anybody who's followed me long enough knows, that that's what I really enjoy doing, is sourcing data, making it efficient to process and look up and use, and then building tool sets to be able to query that really easily. I think on its face, this is an awesome idea. Thing that gets me a little bit edgy on this is that this is sort of starting to cross the chasm of everything is going to be an ML model that we can use to find people online, and that there's never going to be such thing as data privacy. And we're sort of promoting the idea of massively scraping the internet at scale with the intent of finding people online and then eventually deducing their physical location or physical activities from that. I think there's a nice balance between open source intelligence used for ethical reasons and just gross, terrible, like data privacy issues. I think this teeters on the edge of that. And the reason why I think that is because for all the different criminals and bad actors that you find using these methods, there's tons and tons of information stored and searched by people who are completely innocent. And a lot of times you cross the two people together. You have two John Smiths that look the same, they live in the same place, and you end up doing a ton of investigation into one. You think it's a high confidence match. It turns out that it's not, it's the wrong person. And now you've dug into an entire person's life without them having any type of reason for you to be looking into them. And this happens a lot in a ton of different industries. It happens in the insurance space. It happens in the law enforcement space. It happens in a whole bunch of different places. And I think we have to be careful before we unleash tools like this on the public. We saw that with Clearview AI. I know that wasn't really publicly facing, but it was pretty much untethered access to businesses at first. Nothing wrong with GeoSpy. They did end up closing it down to just law enforcement only. But when it was publicly available, it was starting to get a little bit creepy. We saw this with facecheck.id, you see it with PimEyes, etc. I think there has to be a line that we decide we're not going to cross for the sake of data privacy and also for the sake of not ruining the internet. If we look at what happened with LLMs, for example, a lot of people's first complaint was that you were scraping all this data online, you were violating copyright, you're doing all these issues without anybody getting compensated for it. This is another example where we have to be careful before we move forward. All right, this moves us over to the paid section of the newsletter. I'm going to briefly talk about what's in it and why it's important. So I mentioned a little bit earlier that a lot of people were asking, hey, a lot of the content that you're putting out there is very advanced. I don't think I'm ready for that yet. Do you have anything in the arsenal, if you will, that is basic, but not so basic that it's like everything else that I find online? So somewhere in between the basic and intermediate level. So I thought, hey, I'm going to come out with a new series similar to what I did with the public records search series that I did recently, where I talk about some of the basics, but in an intermediate to an advanced type of light. And in this issue, I talk specifically about search in a post-AI world. That's the name of the title. And what I wanted to do here is say, like, hey, there's a lot of methodology that you hear, you see in courses, you see online and like free articles on Medium that just tell you about how to construct Google Docs, how to search on social media, how to do all this basic searching and things like that. I wanted to take a look at that and say like, hey, how do we update this now that AI is in the picture, now that all these advanced tool sets are in the picture, now that search engines are losing their relevance a little bit, just a little bit, and social media is starting to lock down some of the search capabilities that we've been used to for a long period of time. And so in this issue, I kind of look at some of the different areas of search. And I do talk about search engines. I talk about how you can use Google and Yandex and Bing to find specific information. And out of all the Google Docs that you have available, which ones you should really tune into and how you can use them for, clever different searches that you can use for your OSINT investigations. But I also talk about how you can apply those dorks, those advanced search operators like cite, facebook.com, in URL posts, searching for different keywords, and how you can make those searches work for you. So you don't have to have this giant list of different search operators that you use and iterate through them every time you want to investigate. You can sort of set up feeds and monitoring to be able to give you information that you're looking for before you even ask for it, and also how to implement some of these things into more advanced workflows. So I do talk about turning Google Docs or search operators into RSS feeds. I talk about how you can put those RSS feeds in RSS readers that have advanced functionality there, like keyword matching and stuff like that. But how you can also create email alerts so that, in the example that I use in the newsletter, specifically talking about your own personal privacy or maybe the privacy of your stakeholders, VIPs, things like that, if you've done protective intelligence. You can use that to monitor whether or not any of your activity has been leaked online. So your usernames, your emails, things like that. You can set up some of those advanced operators as email alerts. So I talk a little bit more about how you can apply some of these methodologies and not necessarily how to do them. But more importantly, I move into how you can integrate AI into this workflow, right? And how there's all these different prompt engineering, air quotes, methodologies that you can use and which ones are going to be the most relevant for OSINT investigators. There's a whole bunch of different ways. There's this guide that I mentioned in the paid newsletter that gives you all these different techniques and methods depending on what your outcomes are. I give you the top 3 that you should focus on as an OSINT investigator, and also how to make sure that you're avoiding things like hallucinations or any type of biases, or what I call the AI trying to please you, where it'll never tell you that it doesn't know. It'll just constantly reaffirm what you're hoping to get from the AI. And then finally, this is something that I mentioned in the newsletter that I don't think is talked about a lot, is a lot of people focus on OSINT from just searching on the internet. And also they talk about AI most recently, right? How to use AI to pull stuff from the internet as well. There's one thing that I don't see enough about, and it's like, hey, once you have content that's downloaded to your local machine, how can you use command line search to be able to find information very efficiently on your device already? And I'll tell you why. So let's say that you're looking at databases, you're looking at those combo lists and things like that I mentioned before, or maybe just like giant CSVs of data, SQL databases, things like that. If you're just relying on what your capabilities are inside the browser, you're not going to be able to dig into a lot of this really good content that is only within gigantic file structures. So getting good at tools like grep or a bunch of different open source libraries for manipulating data or searching within CSVs, you're leaving a lot on the table, because you can download a 5 terabyte SQL file and then run grep to be able to parse through that information and see if there's anything valuable in there for you. Or if you have a CSV with 800,000 rows or something like that, instead of you having to try to open it up in Excel, which will probably just freeze your Excel, or try to get a proprietary tool like Table Cruncher to be able to open some of these large files and then Command F or Control F through it, you can just use grep. You can use the power of regex to find a variety of different things you're looking for. And best of all, you don't even have to know how to really do this stuff. You just have to know that it exists. You can use tools like AI to be able to write commands in grep for you. you can use tools like AI to write the regex patterns for the types of things you're looking for. So all you really have to know is how to get the tool set up, how to use the tool, really, like what its use cases are, and then the rest of it's going to be done for you. And this is kind of what I was talking about earlier about using AI to make yourself more efficient and not necessarily using the AI to do all the work for you. And so I think this is a great episode or a great issue of the OSINT newsletter for people who are beginner, but they've already consumed all the beginner content online and they're looking for something that's right on the edge of beginner to intermediate. And I also think some of these advanced readers might actually enjoy the issue as well, because it kind of looks at things in a fresh light. And a lot of times some of our skill sets get stale over time. And so looking especially at this guide for AI prompt engineering for OSINT, I think that's going to be really helpful for a lot of people. So that's it for this episode of the OSINT podcast. Make sure that you subscribe if you're interested in this type of content. And more importantly, head on over to the OSINTnewsletter.com. It's not the OSINT newsletter, just OSINTnewsletter.com. And subscribe there as well. We have nearly 26,000 subscribers at this point. Every 2 weeks, there will be a new issue that's published. There'll also be a podcast that's a companion to that. And in the future, we're going to be looking at doing some interviews, getting some other people on the podcast to talk about more of these topics. That way you're not just hearing from me and my point of view on the whole situation. So thanks again for listening, and we will see you next time.